Hello, everybody, and hopefully our Facebook Live is working as well. My name is Sam Jack. I'm a librarian here, and it's so great to have all of you with us for this event. I want to thank Leonardo and Latino Vision for putting this together. As you can see, we're in our wonderful new building. Probably some of you, this is your first time in here, so we're so grateful to the Newton community, and especially all the people that contributed to our capital campaign for making this possible. And now it's going to be a blessing for many, many years to come. So I would just encourage you all to take a look at our website. There's a newsletter sign up page that you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. We also have a newsletter that emails like local history, and that's the one to sign up for to get email blasts that I send out before events much like this one. And we just love hosting events like this and community groups to highlight local history and to have great legendary people here like Connie. So I will now turn it over to Leonardo from the Latino Vision Association. So thank you again so much.
Hello, everybody. We got a really good crowd here today. This is one of our first smaller community events. We plan on doing many more in the future. Like Sam was saying, I'm Leonardo with Latino Vision Association, and we are dedicated to educating everybody, young and older, on different events that go on in the community, and having a whole bunch of different celebrations. So today we have these two lovely ladies. We have Connie Palacioz and Anita Mendoza, and they're both going to be doing some presentation. We're going to have a small presentation of the documentary on the Fast Pitch tournament. And I just want to thank everybody else for coming out again. We have some snacks over here on the table and the sign-up sheet if anybody's interested in learning about future events that we have going on, big and small. So if you have any questions, feel free to find me afterwards or during, whenever. We can have a little talk. So I will pass it off to Miss Connie. We'll give her a big round of applause.
So I guess when you're 99 years old and you get stubborn, she goes, I didn't know there were gonna be this many people here. I don't know what to say. I said, well, they want to hear your story. Well, she wants me to tell her story. So I said, well, I'll just do some questions and answer format. And she goes, well, make sure you ask the questions that I know the answers to. So it's been a busy day for today. My brother, Jerry, he's over there, my baby brother, Jerry, but he's older than I am, but I'm the baby really, but he's my baby brother. Now he's telling my bigger brothers, he was my favorite because he was the closest to me, but he brought her to school today. We did a Zoom conference with one of my students that I had from back in 1987. I don't know what school in Columbia, Missouri she's affiliated with, but they're doing a World War II project. So they asked us to do a Zoom. So we did a Zoom with 75 kids today. Nice. And it's kind of hard for mom to hear. I believe not only because of her age that she had hearing loss, but back when she worked at Boeing 1943 to 45, they did not wear earplugs and stuff that we have today. And we're almost sure that's probably where her hearing loss came from, and besides her age. So I admit, I'm not that old and I still forget things. So I guess for her at 99, it's okay too. So, so I'll start off a little bit. I have her story here and then we'll try to see if you have questions, but she was a senior at Newton High School and she would work after school at a laundromat pressing Navy uniforms for the Hutchinson Navy base. Do you remember how much you were making an hour? 25 cents an hour. Oh. So one day in April of 1943, where did you hear about Boeing hiring for the war? At the employment office. Okay, the employment office here in Newton. She heard that Boeing needed help for the war effort, and so they were hiring people to work on the airplanes. And they were training people And how much were you making at the beginning when you first started?
At Wayne, 75%, 50 cents.
50 cents an hour. So she was gonna double her pay. So she thought that was really good. And then once you worked at the plant, that was in training. So she is right. I guess I was wrong. Because when she got to the plant, then it was 75 cents. So you are right, Mom. I'm sorry. Okay. And, so she graduated in May of 1943. They gave her the information at the employment office. And then when she graduated, she would go to Wichita from Newton. And she applied. She was hired immediately. And she said, that, she would come back and work for them, but she had to give notice to the Navy base. So I don't know, did you give a 2-week notice like they do now?
Yeah.
Okay, and then she quit her job and she went to work for Boeing. So, there's a lot of things I think in telling her story that I've learned, and some of you that know, Newton, and I would say my brothers and other family members, and many of you here probably experienced the discrimination in Newton at that time. I was very fortunate that if I experienced it, I didn't really know it, okay? I would say I had more discrimination from my Mexican classmates probably than, from the white classmates that I was friends with. And I think it was just, they would say, oh, you got this position because you're a Mexican and they needed to have a Mexican on the cheerleading squad, things like that. So it was a different kind of discrimination. But her story, it's one that I tell to a lot of classrooms. We've had a lot of History Day projects. Those of you that are working with the high schools know that they have a Kansas History Project Day. And I think that's one of the great stories that we can tell of that. I think Mom is a very tough woman that came through that era. But she said that she wanted to do her duty and serve her country with the war effort because she had a brother and her fiance at the time and an uncle serving in the Navy overseas. So Newton had a bus and they would take employees from Newton to Boeing. First, though, they would go to the Orpheum Theater there on Broadway. They would drop them off there. Then you would walk over to the training center, which is to the north of, it's the Drury Hotel now. It used to be Broadview Hotel back then, okay? And there was a training center there. And so the bus would take people that were being trained. She said she would walk, to catch the bus to go to Wichita, and the bus had several stops in Newton to pick up other employees. So you had a full bus when you went. So Wichita, once they dropped them off, she was told on the first day there when she went to the training center that they needed riveters. And she said, that's fine with me. I'll do whatever you want me to do, right? And after 2 weeks, they told her she was able, you're doing very good, Connie, in riveting, so I'm gonna send you to the plant. So she says her first day of the plant was very disappointing. Why was it disappointing, Mom? Can you tell them?
Speak to them. Because they all made fun of me and they didn't help me at all.
Okay.
And I just had to take the rivets from the to the workers, but they were mean to me. But then afterwards, they became my best friends.
So the males, she experienced some discrimination from the males. Things were really different back then. It wouldn't happen nowadays, like that. And so she said on the first day, she picked up trash and she would get the rivets for workers that needed them. And then she said on the second day, her supervisor was Pete Ortega, and he came to her and said, I'm gonna be your lead man. And I was told, if you need some water, Mom. I was told that you're a riveter and we could sure use you in Department 330. And that was, the department that they were gonna start her in. And he said, but we have a problem. And the only problem is that we need a bucker for you. But we have a black girl named Jerry. And no one was willing to work with Jerry because she was black. So Mom said, well, I'll work with her. I'm Mexican American. And she said, these guys have been teasing me and I want to get out of here. She wanted to get out on the plant to do that. So she met Jerry and they were assigned to the first B-29 that was being built in Wichita. And they were assigned to the pilot section. And Jerry and her became a good team. They were known as, you know, the best riveter and bucker of Department 330. And you guys ended up making $1 an hour pretty fast, right? And you wouldn't let them separate you, correct?
No, I won't let them.
Okay, so can you tell what does the bucker do and what did you do?
Oh, the bucker holds the bar at the back. And you put the rivets in,
Get it right up to it.
and then I threw my rivet gun, the bucker would press and make the rivets go flat.
Yeah.
To hold the panels together. Yeah, so she did a very good job, and every time that she needed a bar that she could get in there, she would draw a picture and take it to Mr. Chacon, because he used to make the bars. And so she used to make the drawings of how to get into the tight places. And then he would make a bar for her.
Okay, so they riveted
500
644 planes, so the no section. So the reason, we knew she worked at Boeing, I think all of our family knew, we did not know she was a Rosie the Riveter. So when she was 75 years old in 2000, you know, back then we had to print a newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, and we would get it. And on the front page, there was an article that Tony Mazzolini, he's an Italian from Ohio, had pulled the plane out of China Lake in California. And he was bringing it to Wichita. Spirit at that time, Boeing, and then it became Spirit Aerosystems was helping them. Jeff Turner, the former CEO of Spirit, is in charge of a foundation that was in charge of that. And they were looking for volunteers. That's kind of when we learned about Jerry. She wanted to find Jerry, her worker. And Mom had written her for 4 years. And after the war had ended, and all of a sudden the letters quit coming. She was coming from Denver is where she lived. And Mom said, I want to go and volunteer. And my brothers thought we were crazy because Mom was driving at 75 years old to Wichita on Oliver. And you know how busy the plant is. And she was going 3 days a week. Okay. And she was doing that. So that was in 2000. They worked in the bunny wash there. They got the plane. When they pulled the plane out of the desert, her nose section, which she worked on dock, only 7 rivets were missing. Did you do a good job on that plane?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. And she got to replace the 7 rivets, and then because she's so tiny, she's been able to go inside the plane and do stuff that a lot of the engineers and the workers couldn't do at this point. 2014, Jeff calls me one day, I was at work, and he said, hey, you know, Oshkosh is coming up, that's the air show. They were flying dock, they were getting it, able to be flying dock, and he said, we want to dress your mom up as Rosie, is that okay? And I go, Rosie? And he said, well, she was Rosie the Riveter. And I go, she was? And that's kind of when we learned. So that's when we started, and that's the poster that many of you see. And I did bring some baseball cards that we give out. You can each have one. But that big poster, we can do it. That started in 2014. Now I want to make it clear, she is not the real Rosie the Riveter that's on the poster. Because the first time we posted that on Facebook, did we get ringed from people? That's not the real Rosie. And we said, we know she's not the real Rosie, but she was on the dock one and she got to do that. And I'll tell you, it's just been an unbelievable experience, I think, for her and our family. We've all, and I've been lucky. I mean, Jerry takes a lot of care with her. My other brothers do too, but I get to travel with her. In fact, this month, May 30th, we're going to fly to Dallas. She'll be dressed as Rosie for a special dinner that night. And then on the 31st, we're flying, and she was invited to the 80th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy, France.
Wow.
So when I got the text, you know, I asked one of my colleagues, I said, is there a Normandy in the United States? It's D-Day? Because I thought, Jeff or Josh is calling me, or telling me, you need to call this lady in Wisconsin about Normandy. And I thought, this can't be the real Normandy in France. And so we're gonna go. All the paperwork's done. We have to have physicals and send our blood work and sign our life away. If we die, we're not getting a dime. We signed that we won't sue anybody. But it's a chartered flight. American Airlines is doing that, and we're going to tell her story. But I think that's been the neat thing about the history and sharing about what's happened in her experience, you know, not only in Newton, because I think many of you could tell the story, but I told the kids this morning about how the white people could use the swimming pool Monday through Friday. Saturday and Sundays was for the Mexicans and the black people to swim. They would drain the pool. They had to sit in the back row of the movie theater. Even at churches, they had to sit in the last two rows. Just different things like that. And I tell kids nowadays, you know, my dad did not want me to speak Spanish because he was afraid I wouldn't get a job. Now I wish I knew it. So, I mean, I understand, but I cannot conjugate properly. And so, now she can speak both languages. So when I get after her for mispronouncing, she says, shut up, I speak 2 languages, you know. So she's right. But it's just been a neat story. When you see Doc fly, tell them how that makes you feel when you see the plane fly.
Oh, when I see that plane fly, I feel great seeing the plane, but I also miss that there were 4 of our workers. They used to work on the B-29, but they passed away, so they never got to ride the plane. So whenever I see the plane go, I remember them.
So Boeing or Spirit has a lot of volunteers that help with that. And so she still volunteers 1 day a week. Jerry takes her every Tuesday. And she's there mostly signing autographs, doing things, but at the Aviation Museum, I know the other day, one of our ADs there in Wichita, his dad, is working at the Aviation Museum, and he tells me your mom was cleaning the bathroom and doing all these parts and things at the Aviation Museum. And that she started there, and it's all for Doc. They signed her autograph, her poster, they used to charge $25. And she says, that's too much money, but the money all goes to the Doc. And if any of you want to see the plane, it's there on Airport Road. And then they have an exhibit. She received one of the Aviation and Women Awards. She was the first one that they've inducted there. And we donated one of her outfits and some memorabilia, some of her rivet guns that Spirit has given her. I mean, she's treated like a VIP. She's spoiled from that aspect. So, but it's been a great experience. Oshkosh, I think it's just unbelievable. The people that we have met, and the history and the people that come to her, and they're crying because their grandma or grandpa was a riveter or a pilot, and they're no longer here. And I think, you know, we are truly blessed for her to still be here at 99 years old. And I know some of you ladies that take care of her at church, you just keep her going, and we're really blessed with that, it's just a great story for her to tell. And she's getting to the point she doesn't want to dress up anymore, and she says she can't tell her story, but I think she can, but she doesn't like to. So that all? I don't know, do you questions or?
Does anybody have questions for?
Yeah. Were you guys ever told that during the war, that was known as a Manhattan Project? And the reason they did that was because of the German spies. They didn't want to know where all that building was, you know, where those bombers were coming out of. So they called it the Manhattan Project at the time. And I just wanted to know, did you know that at the time, or the
Yeah.
workers know that?
The workers, and that's why it was classified.
Yeah,
They could not have, of course, they didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
She says, but they couldn't take photos or anything, so.
yeah, we have a couple of photos of my Aunt Luann and my Aunt Lucy. And I think they kept working on the planes during the war. And they said too that they'd have to get on the bus to go down there.
Right, I think on hers, because Doc was a B-29 and a bomber, that Department 330, there were no pictures that were published or anything because it was classified. They have never found any of their department,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, because my aunt and them said they were doing it for the Manhattan Project, that's what it was called. And that they were doing it and that they took the pictures. And I happen to have a couple of the pictures of them working, you know, in the plane.
Those are
They
treasures.
weren't allowed to take pictures, but they were doing it for the company.
Okay, right, and I think that's why the bomber was classified, and that's the one that she did. And it's funny that she worked in Department 330, and a couple of years ago, we were in Dallas at the air show, that's where the crash was with the B-51. We happened to be there, and our hotel room was 330. I thought, isn't this kind of odd? But I just said that department's following you, but at that air show, we were staying where that crew was flying in, we were staying with all of them, and then the second crew was an older crew that they subbed at the last minute, and they're the plane that was crashed. But, so the bombers, it was just a little bit different, but yes, got a question?
How old were you when you started being a riveter?
How old were you when you started being a riveter?
Oh, I was 18 years old.
18 years old. So, yes.
She's obviously very small. Were there special dispensations or ways that they accommodated so that you could do that difficult work you were doing?
What? You know, she said you were very small, so did they do accommodations or assign you to special assignments in that? She says that she had to ask for help, and sometimes the men would not help her with ladders to climb to the top and different things, but once they got really good, then she said they helped her. They would do that, but since then, working on the refurbishing of the plane and that, then she's been gone inside and done special things, like putting little plates inside. She gets to ride the bombardier seat. I never have. I've gotten to ride on the plane. I don't know if any of you paid to go on the plane, but it's not cheap. And she gets to ride on the bombardier. She's been through the tunnel too, a couple times, climbing through while it's flying, and I mean, it's scary, but she'll go anytime. She doesn't care about that. So it's just, but I think she's been able to do a little bit more. And like she said, she never realized what the engineers and all those people did that volunteer now. I mean, it's amazing, the people that go back to help to keep that plane flying. And it cost about $10,000 for a flight, for fuel. Just fuel only, and they're all volunteers, so.
I think you said, but, can you remind us how many years ago it was that you two started, doing these World War II commemorative activities? And then I'm wondering, you know, over the years, obviously, the people with the firsthand experiences of that era, like Connie has, you know, they're getting older, and there are few of them left with us. I wonder if you've seen a change in the tone or even more increased emphasis on treasuring these people and remembering that time as the sort of the memory bearers of that era are fewer. Yeah.
I think what I have learned when we went to Oshkosh, I did not realize how tight the flying community is, not only of armed services, but workers that have worked in that. And I think, that's the beauty that brings them together. I mean, we get requests all the time. Jerry was teasing me the other day. He brought me some envelopes and I just kind of ignored them. I thought they were statements or something. And there were 7 or 8 envelopes, people signing, they want autographs. And it's people that say, my grandma or my aunt or somebody used to work, they're no longer here, will you sign and do this? And I imagine, like everybody else, they know where she lives, so, they send that, and he goes, I threw a bunch of those envelopes away, and I said, Jerry, you better not have done that, because that might be somebody that really wants something special, and then about an hour later, he goes, I was just teasing you, so he said he brought them all, but, yeah, you would not believe the stories we hear or the things they give her, pictures, and then she signs, she's asked to sign autographs and stuff. And it's just, they just feel a connection to her. The people that are going on this trip, they're 96 to 107. And I think she's the only one that does not need a wheelchair, but she will be in a wheelchair. And she's not happy about that, but I said, Mom, we're gonna be moving fast, you need to do that. And the events, the Memorial Day concert, I just got an email from Gary Sinise yesterday. I can't wait to see Connie again. And I said, we're not going, Gary. I wrote back and I said, I told them 3 weeks ago, we're not going because that's right before we leave, and that's a big trip to go to Paris. And, but she was there 2 years ago, but because of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, Eisenhower Foundation invited her. That was one of the invites in there. I had to call and say, we're gonna be in Normandy, France that week. We can't go. So there's not very many people left. And even though she doesn't want to talk and tell the story, she still has her mind pretty much. I mean, it's just the biography that we had to do for this. It'll be interesting, but it took us about 5 hours, and they were asking, what was it like growing up in Newton? And, you know, by the railroad and that. And it took me 5 hours, and I had to give her a Bud Light to make her happy. Just like, here, you can have a Bud Light, drink this if you answer, but I can't remember, that was too far back. And I said, Mom, think back, you know, what were you doing in high school? You know, what class? She didn't remember the class. Oh, we just heard they made an announcement over the radio about that and things like that. So, you know, there are not very many around, or the Rosies that are just in homes or, you know, with dementia and different things. And I mean, we're just really lucky. So I think that's the true story and why we just need to treasure every minute of it. And so we had these baseball cards. I had these made. This front picture is her high school picture with it, and then the back is her poster, and then there's another one that the back is of her riding in the bombardier seat of the plane. And so she just signed her first name on it. I didn't have her sign Connie Rosie the Riveter. She had 2,000 to do for France. She told me she did them all. They weren't all signed, Jill. I found a whole nother, probably 600. So tonight, before we came, I said, you keep writing and writing. We still have another stack because they want us to take them to Normandy. But, you know, it's just a way to remember and for people, you know, to see. Yes, Jerry.
Why don't you mention what the airline says, who's all going with them? With the nurses and...
Oh, so the airline, because of the age of the veterans, they're taking 2 doctors, 2 registered nurses, 2 nurse practitioners. And then that's why we had to submit all, and the medications have to be in the exact bottle. Even for me, I had to have it. And nobody else could go. I asked Jerry if he wanted to go. He thought, oh, you need to go. They'll take care of us and they'll be with us all the time. Well, one place I think will be in Normandy will be divided up, but the other ones will be at one hotel. So they'll take care of us. And even in Oshkosh, they spoil us a lot. We're supposed to go to Oshkosh this year. We haven't been since COVID. And they've been the last 3 years, but last year, I was gonna take her on my own, and then Doc had some flying issues, and they never made it to Oshkosh, so it's probably a good thing. Fifi, you know, it's still a B-29. She said, those of you know Fifi, it's not as shiny and pretty as Doc. So I have to get after her because we're there. She'll say, oh, look how pretty Doc is compared to Fifi. I said, Mom, you cannot say that. The Fifi crew would not be happy with that. So.
Army green color.
Right. Fifi, it's not camel, but it's just dull. It's not shiny.
And it's green.
And it's green, yes, yes, so.
plane?
What? That's another B-29. Those are the only two that are flying, that are left. So Tony Mazzolini, he's a great guy who worked so hard through government, nightmares of getting this plane here to Wichita and then for it to fly. It's just, and it
Mention what they were doing to the plane before it got.
What? Oh, they would, in China Lake, they were shooting at it, as targets and things. Used it for the training exercises and different things like that. So in fairness though, the nose section, I don't think they shot at, but it was good that there were only 7 rivets missing, but I don't think they shot at that. They were able to do that. And there's pictures, if you go see that story, Tony is pulling on a trailer that plane out. And he loves Mama because he said she's like my mama. His mom was an Italian. And every morning before we would start at 6 o'clock, they have us out there and she's sitting there saying, I didn't get my rosary prayed before we left. So she'd be sitting there praying her rosary and Tony would say, oh, that's my Italian mama there, just like that. And just the neat stories that we have. I remember we were there one day, they sell these window wings. They're like $450. They're about $175 a piece, but if you buy all 4 of them, you get them for $450 or $500. And so when she signs her name, Connie Rosie the Riveter, I said, Mom, they've spent $500. You cannot mess up your name. So I have to write her name out, their name and everything. And this guy says, I'll give you another $400 if you go sign the bar top. He has like a bar in a little house there on the airstrip in Oshkosh. And I said, well, you have to ask Josh because we're here for spirit, not, that's what it's for. So he said, well, if you're going to donate $400 back to the plane, you can take her. So we get in a cart and we go to this bar. It's a house, a little thing, and it's a big old wooden bar. All kinds of movie stars and everything have signed it. Of course, she can't even get up to the stool, they're pushing her up like that. And then she goes, what am I supposed to do? I said, you have to write on this table. I got to write on there. And I said, you write Connie Rosie the Riveter. And they show people, her autograph. And then the pictures, you just took picture after picture after picture. And he was a Pizza Hut franchisee from Tulsa. And, but it's just people, they live to hear the story. And, so to think about the discrimination and stuff, I think that made her one tough woman, to go through because, we talked about her high school experience, how that's what I was telling the kids today. There was Manuel and what was Manuel's wife's name?
Martinez.
No, but what was his wife's name?
Margie.
Emmanuel was a Mexican boy in her class and Margie was a white girl here and they dated and the administration wanted Mom to break them up. And so they would lose her test. She would pass the, social studies teacher would go down and say, Connie didn't take the test. And she said, I passed it forward. And because they wanted her to break them up. Manuel ended up dropping out of high school, got his GED. And Margie graduated, then they got married after high school and they lived in Wichita. When Margie died, Manuel had already died. I don't know. I don't think we went to the funeral. But when Margie died, we went and her kids were saying, what are you doing here? And I told them the story. I said, Mom, and I said, your dad loved your mom. And Mom said, I wasn't going to break them up. But, kids nowadays, they just don't realize what people went through. And, I told Margie's kids, I said, your dad really loved your mom and your mom loved your dad. Look what they did. He gave up his high school education so he can marry your mom. It's just, so there's all kinds of things like that. I think that we've learned by telling the story. But, and I'm sorry that she's not talking and I am, but. Any other questions?
How many rivets are in that intersection?
Oh, thousands, I don't know. We don't know how many rivets are in the nose section. It's just thousands. We ask.
There's so many.
There's so many up there that, but it rides pretty smooth, but it's a neat plane ride. Noisy, we have to wear headphones now. I mean, she says but I really think that's her hearing loss.
Is she left or right-handed?
Are you left or right-handed, Mama? Left or right-handed?
I'm a right-handed.
She's right-handed. Yeah. We'll be around in case there's anything. You can read, when you get a card, you can read about her. She's on the internet, even though she doesn't do the internet. Facebook, she always has me take pictures, so I'll be taking lots of pictures, and I put it on my page to document her story. And, we're looking forward to a nice trip. Hopefully, well, God willing, we'll make it. And what an experience.
And so you said something about a documentary. Is there any type of film or book that has her story or that she's a part of something?
The B29 has a DVD. I think they're all sold out because we tried to buy one at our birthday party that we had there. And I think they're making a new one, but you can see it on the doc website. And there's a lot of little articles of awards and different things. And then if you go there, they have documentaries. Spirit has done 2 of them and they're running at the hangar. I think I have some copies on DVDs, and she was in National Geographic many years ago. There's all kinds of things. My house, her room, I have a little room. It's her little, what do you call it? Her little shrine is what we call it. Yeah, and my husband said, why are you hanging these up? She was honored by the Senate legislature in March, and she got 2 huge frames. And so they were sitting there. I said, Rand, we need to put them up. So put them above the bed where she sleeps, and a lot of her trophies and just eagles. She got a big award in Dallas. Just all these things, but if you on the internet, it says a lot of it, and that's where I think people hear about her, or they have seen us in Oshkosh. We have one little girl. They brought her for 5 or 6 years, and that family every year sends us a Christmas card and wants to know how mom's doing. So Josh told me we're going to try to take her up this year because we just never know how long she's going to be here. Or we may be gone before she is. So, you never know. So, yeah. Yes.
You were talking about her coworker and losing contact with her. Was she ever able to find that contact or the family or anything like that?
We have not. Jerry Warden was her name. That's why she was in National Geographic, and the AP, the Wichita Eagle, did that in hopes of finding Jerry. But Boeing and Spirit had never found her. So we really think that she was deceased. So, she never did. And that was her goal of volunteering, which, is, and so, a lot of times we'll say, this is for Jerry. Jerry did this plane, and, she'll tell people, I would have never gotten rid of Jerry. And, they were a pair. So, and she was a little stubborn. Some of her stories about, the things that she did at the laundromat with their bosses. One time she was ironing and the lady said they were going too slow. And she said, well, we're only worth 25 cents an hour. And so they asked for a raise. What's your friend's name?
Mrs. Houston.
Mrs. Houston was a lady, but what was your friend's name that you worked with?
Linda.
Linda. And so Linda and her, they wanted $1 raise, $1. And the lady, she said, but we're only worth a quarter. So she called them in at the end of the day and she said, okay, I'm gonna give you $1, but don't you tell anybody. And Mom said, what'd you have to do the next day then? When you got paid $1 an hour?
We had to iron all those Navy uniforms.
And when you had to go fast, right?
Yeah.
She said, oh, we're getting paid $1. We gotta go, Linda. And they were doing it fast. And I said, Mom, you were a rebel. She goes, well, they're only worth 25 cents an hour. They didn't have unions back then, but that was her. She was the union leader at that time. So, yeah. So, okay, well, we better let the other speaker and then we can answer questions. Okay.
How do you follow that?
Hi, my name's Anita Mendoza, and I'm from Wichita, Kansas.
up the street. I'm with the North End Historical Society. And the reason we started our historical society was to tell our stories, just like Connie. I found in doing research, there was very few stories of the Mexican Americans here in the state of Kansas. And it's been very important to me to preserve that history, because as you know, many generations have passed and those stories are lost. So what we did in Wichita is we started doing oral history beginning in 2019, just so we could start preserving some of the stories of the first immigrants that came, that worked the railroads, worked the packing houses, the beet fields, and the grain mills. So one, it's really kind of interesting how I ended up here in Newton today. And I always think of it as my grandmother Inez. My grandmother Inez came from Mexico. She came from Chihuahua, and as a young girl, and her father worked the railroads in Florence, Kansas. So just right up the street. When her father came at that time, my grandmother, when she was 15, had an arranged marriage. And being a young woman at that age, you know, I can't even imagine, you know, being in an arranged marriage. But somehow she met a gentleman. Well, I shouldn't say gentleman, he was probably a young man, and she must have fell in love, because my aunt says that my grandmother would sneak out of the house to meet him. And his name happened to be Connie Palacioz. Yeah. And they lived in Florence. And unbeknownst to me, we've never really kind of connected with the Palacioz family until recently. But my Ray Elias had a picture, and he sent it to me, and he's like, hey, do you know the Palacioz family? Well, the picture was of Casimiro Palacioz, and it was a school picture out of Matfield Green. Yeah. Had no idea that they had worked the railroads in Matfield Green, because there's no stories. There is nothing documented about where they traveled, where they worked. And there is the oldest, the only, I believe, bunkhouse in Matfield Green. And the residents, the men that worked in that bunkhouse were Palacioz. So what an interesting story of this family here in Kansas. And it's not shared, it's not told, probably amongst the family, but I'm sure there was probably so many stories that have been lost about this one family. And for those that don't know the story, there were brothers, and the railroad company could keep them straight and made them change their last name. So there was some brothers that had the Z, Palacioz with a Z, some that had a Palacioz with an S, and then some who left it out. But they're all related. And I think how many more families, how many more people were forced to change their name because of situations like that, or misunderstandings like that.
She was Gladys in high school instead of Consuelo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She doesn't like Gladys. Yeah.
Yeah. My dad's first name was Javier, but they spelled it with a B, and it's with a V. But I'm sure there was a nurse that couldn't understand what my grandmother was saying in writing down his name on his birth certificate. So when my dad died, they put a B on his headstone, and I went back and changed it. I had them change it. So I'm just amazed really how this process of telling stories and what's come out of the telling of the stories in Wichita has led me here today. Because in many ways, we're all related through the railroads or the packing houses that have, you know, that the workers came up through Mexico and worked in different cities. I did a book with Jay Price out of WSU. It's about the North End community in Wichita.
We printed that, I believe it came out 2022. And out of that book, a gentleman, Richard Santillan, out of California, reached out. And they are wanting to do a fast pitch softball book of the teams in Kansas. So we've been working on this for a few years. Rail Eyes is working on the Newton teams. So if you have not talked to Ray or shared photos or shared your stories, whether it's a relative, yourself, a friend, please do, because this is I'm gonna leave this up here for anyone to look at. And it's not just about the fast pitch, but it's about the lives of the families that worked and lived in the different cities in Kansas. And a lot of it is tied to the railroads. What I've learned in doing our oral history and some of our research on this is that as the railroads, as Santa Fe was bringing up the workers, and they stopped in all these little towns, churches formed, communities formed, sports formed, friends, families. So it's a really good way for us to tell our family stories through this book. So I hope, we've been working on this a couple of years, but I hope that we can have it out by the end of the year. So please don't hesitate. If you know somebody, let them know that we are working on this, because we definitely want to put them in here. But yeah, it's out of a group out of California, and we're trying to put together the fast pitch. So with that, I've been doing my own, trying to do my family research on both sides of the family now. And I had an old picture from 1928. And it was my grandfather's brother-in-law, my great aunt's husband had started a team, the Aztecas in Wichita, Kansas, 1928. And so I tried to start finding these families in Wichita, just to do a little bit of more research. This photo's, I love this photo, just to learn who these people are. And how did they end up in Wichita, Kansas? I mean, how did we all end up in Kansas of all places? But what I've learned is that at that time, I mean, Kansas was, especially Wichita, it was a booming place. I mean, with the packing houses and the railroads. I mean, we were kind of at the size of Chicago. We just never stopped growing, I guess. But with that photo, I kind of learned about Newt and the tournaments. And I really want to thank Manuel Jaso and the Newton Mexican-American Athletic Club for their documenting their stories, the teams, their Hall of Fame. I mean, that is just incredible. So last year, it was the 75th year of the tournaments. And I thought, this is the time. I mean, 75 years, this is it. We have got to record these stories. So we were able to interview 18 of the Hall of Famers from across Kansas and reach out to them. We could have done so much more. There's so many more stories to people to interview and to collect. And we put it in a little documentary. And I was able to receive funding through Humanities Kansas. If anyone's ever worked with them, they're wonderful to work with. And we were able to do a video. So tonight we're going to share that video. It's about 22 minutes. It's not my last video because I really want to do the railroads. Probably my next undertaking. And once we show the video, if you guys have questions, we could do a little Q&A. So I think for time, we better get started on that. So Sam?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
And I think I was gonna go ahead and we've got a few people watching online. I was just gonna go ahead and pause the live stream and then start it up again after the video. So those of you online, just check back in a little over 20 minutes and we will see you on the live stream again.
I very much encourage everyone, you know, pull your photos out, sit down with your loved ones, write it down, because if you don't, it's gonna be lost. So, we're working on a fast pitch book, but through the North End Historical Society, I'm always looking at doing oral history, collecting photos. I don't want your photos, I just want to scan. And it's so important to me. When I started doing research on my own family, it really bothered me when I found a few photos and all it said was Mexican girl, Mexican boy, and no names. You know, not even, it didn't even take anyone a moment just to write their name down. Who is this person? So it is very important to me that our names are told and shared. A friend of mine said, we die twice. One, when our body's gone, our soul leaves and goes to heaven. The second time, when we are forgotten. No one's gonna ever forget Connie. That is for sure. And I'm gonna make sure that through the books, through the videos, through our historical society, that it carries on. So thank you for coming out. If anyone has any questions.
That young man is this man.
Yeah. And for you, so the Latin legends, Chris Rodriguez. Now, Chris Rodriguez, I learned played for like every team in every city and every, he was all over the place. But he puts together these books of the pictures in Kansas, and he's working on another one this year. So that's how I got that photo of Paul. Because Paul hasn't given me any photos.
Good take pictures.
Yeah, Bill Roman told me they were more concerned with buying beer than money for photos.
I don't want to tell, I mentioned about soccer, which I really still don't like soccer. But I also have thought in that our families aren't as big as they used to be. And that's kind of where some of the feed came from. Like the Escobar brothers, the Rodriguez brothers. I came from a family of 6 brothers and 5 of us played fast pitch. So that's kind of the feed too. I guess I should have mentioned that we have lost our large families. You know, there just isn't that many large families. And they just mentioned about that guy that's pitching up there. Thanks to Paul, I have arthritis in my. But it was, hey, it's a memory I'll never forget. And I don't see the young kids here today, but we did not take pictures. You know, really very few pictures. You got a picture right here. You got a camera here right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I tell all these kids that I've watched play our tournament, take pictures. I don't have that many pictures to fall back on. Take as many pictures as you can, because you're gonna want to remember those memories when you get old like me.
The treasures, the older, you know, old pictures. I mean, that's treasures to be able to find. And what's amazing there, I have a Facebook page. It's called North End Wichita Historical Society. What's been great about that is someone can upload a photo of a class or a wedding, and other people will say, hey, that's my mom, that's my dad in that photo, I didn't even know, or I didn't, you know. So it's been great to share, because you may not have photos, someone out there has photos of family members. And our Facebook page has been really good, because that's happened a lot where a photo was uploaded. Ray sent me a photo, had no idea that the Palacioz lived in Matfield Green, would have no idea. So again, just sharing the story also helps us connect each other with family and with friends, and just keeping that going, because it's so important here in Kansas. You know, California, they got all their stories, Texas, but here in Kansas, you can Google it, there's not a lot told about. And we've been here probably I mean, we've been working this railroad since the early 1900s and before. And hey, we're native to this, you know, we're indigenous to this land. So we've got to tell these stories, so. Does anyone else? Right?
Yeah, I just want to make the correlation between these two stories. There's an actual beautiful connection because when the Mexican laborers came to Kansas, then they came in the early 20s, just like you were saying when your family came and their families came. And then the men were working on the railroad. So then here comes World War II, and these men then said, well, I've got a new country to support. So they go off and join the military. And then they were here, while they were here, they were working on the railroad. And so the railroad then needed workers, and they actually hired the women from the community. Now, in Connie's place, she went and worked at the aircraft factories, but there was many of the women in Newton that worked at the roundhouse at the railroad here. So the Mexican men that went off, their places were replaced by the Mexican, their wives or their girlfriends, or soon to be wives when they came back. So then when they came back, they were the veterans, and these women that had supported them during the war efforts, they came back and then started the tournament. And then once again, these women supported those tournaments by making the food, doing the fundraising and things like that. So there's a great correlation between these two that I think just has to be acknowledged in their storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, I want to say that, we have a thing on Facebook that's called, it's a Jason thing. And we all share pictures because I think that like my mom had some pictures that Vicky's mom didn't have. You know, some of them. So we share the pictures because you never know when you may have a fire and all the pictures are gone.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's important to share your pictures
yeah.
with family and make sure that you got names on them. Because we found a lot of my mom's pictures didn't have names on the back and we didn't know who they were, you know.
And upload those because there's someone out there that's gonna go, oh, that's my mom, or that's my aunt, or my grandma, you know. Because I've got pictures. My dad he loved taking photographs, and he's passed. I've got all these photos. And so, you know, I'll upload something. Oh yeah, that's so-and-so and so. So it's good. Even it just breaks my heart when I talk to someone. They go, oh yeah, I had photos of my mom. We just threw them away. Like so many times we've heard this, you know, but save them. Even if you don't know who they are, upload them. Someone may know. You had a question?
Yeah, to have the tournament here in Newton, that's a really cool thing, and congratulations to everybody for 75 years. I'd kind of like to know how many people here have actually got to see Paul pitch. Yeah, great game. You're a great pitcher. It's a lot of fun to see your game. You were really good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, that picture, because those of you that have played know that I'm about ready to throw a change up, and I probably threw about 10 in my whole career. I was considered a power pitcher, so I didn't throw change up.
Yeah, I played with Paul, and there's a lot of times where we get beat on a Saturday, and we end up in the finals. He pitched 7, 8 games on Sunday. His arm would be swelled up, and he'll say, I'm just gonna throw it in there and let them pop up, and you guys do it. And we play a tougher team than you do, but Paul was one of the best pitchers back in his time.
Good.
And I believe he still throws out the first pitch for the old timers game for every 4th of July. He warms up that elbow and that arm to get a pitch or two out. So, yeah.
Well, I need to get some pictures of him this year then.
I was telling Cindy, somebody was, and I can't remember for the life of me. I say she forgets, I forget, was talking about Cindy's parents and her aunt and uncle. And then they mentioned the Mexican food at the tournament. Do you still have it at the church? I still can't remember who it is, but I cried when I saw the pictures of the church, of the ball field. I hadn't seen that in ages. Whoever had those pictures brings back
Gil
memories.
Solis. Is that correct? You'll see these have those.
I have
pictures.
not seen those
Yeah.
pictures in ages, brought back good memories, but I still don't remember who it was. It just happened a few days ago. But they asked about the food and I said, she still cooks.
Used to have a team together, the Norrises and the Sandoval girls. And we used to play them in that field when the old, yeah. All field.
And they used to
have a women's league too.
To tell you another connection I have to Newton is my mom's sister Lola married Carlos Menares. So Gina Menares is and then my cousin on my dad's side, Patsy Mendoza, married, she married Gil. Yeah.
When we were going through my mother's pictures, there was pictures of friends of theirs, but we knew who they were. But I told my sister they would have no meaning to our children. So what we did is we tried to give these, give them back to the people that were in the pictures.
Yeah. Sam's been trying to.
Yeah, I ended up the Harvey County Historical Museum has a photo archive that is based on contributions of photos. And I don't know if any of them are here tonight, and I don't want to speak for what their process is for accepting photos, but I know the ones that are there have been contributed by community members. So if you all have photos that, and all photos have some sort of historical value, of course, but you might consider that, get in touch with them. If you might think that look at their collection, if you think you've got some photos that seem like they would fit in with their Harvey County Historical Museum's online collection, that's a great thing to consider as well.
That's a good idea. All my collections going, if I don't create a cultural museum, they'll go to the Sedgwick County Museum. Because my daughter says, Mom, I don't want your junk.
Right. Do you have a business card? I have some photos from when we played and I'd like to send to you.
Oh, absolutely. I have some, I ran out of business cards, but I do have these cards that have my email address on them.
Email, yeah.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Thank you.
Reach out to me. I would love to. I don't want them, I can scan them. Now Ray may take them. Ray.
I have a few that I like to send.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love that.
Some pictures that the nurse and doctor would go to the ranchitos, and a lot of the Mexican people would go to get their kids vaccinated there. And we have 3 or 4 of those pictures.
Those.
I used to know where to send them.
Do you have them?
I have it.
Okay.
I mean, back in the 90s when we were doing the fiestas, we collected a number of them.
Okay.
But, I'd always like to review and make sure there's not any that are missing.
And yeah, make sure they're scanned at the front, but absolutely, because those are treasures. Those are one of the kind. We just don't have a lot of documentation. Connie's husband drew maps of the ranchitos, and there was a map drawn of Wichita. And but it's cut off, and it was in a newspaper. And there's other family members that I would love to see who lived in these boxcars in Wichita. But yeah, they're priceless. Those are priceless because nobody, if you don't tell the story, nobody knows, who would have thought, but nobody knows. So he was very wise to do that, and that there are some documentations of where they lived, because no one would have, where did they live when they came here? There weren't houses, so.
I have a box of stuff from him that might have it, but it's in storage, so I won't throw it away.
I just wanted to comment on the one photo she talks about that she found the Palacioz connection was that, speaking of ranchitos, is that I had been told, that's once again back in the 90s, that the old railroad housing right by the tracks in Matfield Green was the only existing railroad housing still standing. So on a whim one time, I was coming back from Emporia, and so I took the exit to go to Matfield Green. got pulled over for speeding. But anyway, I got to the homes and went up there and they were deserted. It was a deserted one long unit. About 6 families could live there probably, right next to the railroad tracks. And I'm, sadly I didn't have a camera, but it was still just kind of like a haunting kind of image to be there and to feel that presence of those families, even as trains went by. But then I said, well, I'm gonna go I need to find out a little bit more about this ranchito. So I went into town and I asked, is there any local historian? And they directed me to a gentleman, an older gentleman that invited me in and said, well, yeah, I have something maybe would be of interest. And it was that one photo, and those 2 young men, the Casimiro Palacioz and one other gentleman or kid, another Palacioz, they're both in the photo. Yeah, right, and they were his classmates, and they're in like 10, 12 years old, and they're in the pachepas, the overalls, and he gave me those photos, and just on a whim of saying, where can I find more history on it? That's how I discovered that photo, so.
Yeah.
And I never really had because it wasn't for Newton, I never really used it, but I held on for all those years, and
that's, and that's amazing. And for me, I think too, me and Ray kind of have crossed paths a little bit working on different projects. Ray's on my board at the North End Wichita Historical Society. But who would have thought Ray, coming from California to Newton, would have a photo that was so, touching to me of a family member. I mean, how does that happen? If you ever on a Saturday morning, it's a beautiful drive, go to Matfield Green.
That's right.
Go to Matfield Green, it's a beautiful drive. The bunk houses are now, what are they called? Bed breakfast. But to stand on that front porch and look out at the Flint Hills, it's amazing. It is a beautiful view. So Saturday morning, Sunday morning, get up early because the drive itself is beautiful. But to get out there and stand, they have a museum, it's open on Saturdays. And just let them know you just wanna, see the bunkhouse. I think they have one of the rooms that is open like a museum that you could tour to kind of get an idea. They're all renovated. But for me, it was the view to imagine these guys after, working all day and to sit out there and then to see these, I understood why they stayed. When I saw that view of the Flint Hills, it's beautiful.
And the train tracks are literally, this is the back porch.
Yeah.
And right there is the
Here's the
train,
train.
and they come by all the time. So
Every hour.
you still get that sensation.
Yeah.
This is a railroad house.
It's amazing. I'm telling you, take the drive. It's really beautiful. So, but I really appreciate everything that you guys have done. Manuel, for helping me, Ray, for helping with the project and sharing. So thank you so much. Leonardo, I really appreciate what you are doing for the community to share the history, the stories here in Newton. So thank you so much and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Just want to thank everybody for coming out. We appreciate it so much. This is an amazing turnout. Give me another round of applause, Ms. Connie and Anita. So thankful that you were able to share your stories with us. Like you were saying, we need to preserve our stories and share them for future generations. Yeah, we don't want to get lost in history. So I just want to thank everybody again for coming out. Big thanks again to Sam and Newton Public Library.
Yeah, thank you all.